Hey everyone, welcome to Zun Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast exploring the connections between anime and Canadian media, and this time around, we're going to be talking about something I haven't done in a while, which is talking about an anime convention. I had ambitious plans this year because this was the 20th anniversary of Bionix, and I figured that, I do panels on that. I should try to go across the country and visit as many conventions as I can, talk about Bionix, because there's going to be so many people who want to talk about Bionix. That has not worked out at all. This year, I have succeeded in going to exactly one convention outside of my home province, or even hometown, and they didn't even accept my panel on Bionix. But hey, it's okay, because the con that I went to, I have to say, is probably the best convention in the entire country. And it was Otakuthon. I had a great time. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And joining me is my good friend, who has been on the show a number of times and was my gracious host to the wonderful city of Montreal. My good friend Christian. Chris, thanks for coming on the show again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So yeah, we spent a couple weeks ago. We were at Otakuthon, and you hadn't been to the con in a few years, right?
Right. So the last time I went to the con was when I was working for the con, and I believe that was in 2018.
2018. So you were working
Yeah.
for them then, and you
Yes.
have a history. But I mean, I think you've just been busy with other things since
Right.
over the last 6 years. I think
Right. Yeah.
work and life and what else have you been busy with lately?
I don't travel as much as I used to, but I'm starting to travel again to visit Japan to go to events.
And there was KuroCon as well, right?
Yeah, this was a small thing that I did,
Yeah.
at some point with my friends. We try to do a convention during the pandemic,
Yeah, uh, remote conventions, which we saw
remote
a few of those
convention. Yes.
pop up, and Kurocon was one of those, and it was a neat little experiment for sure. But yeah, you were back to Otakuthon this year, my first time at this con and in Montreal ever, and it was fun because I got there a couple days early and spent some time exploring the city. I went to like Montreal Street, which was one of the pedestrianized areas. I got some bagels, tried some smoked meat, all the things you're supposed to eat when you go to Montreal. I went up the mountain,
That's
saw
right.
the
That's
saw
right.
Leonard Cohen, and I have to say we were spending a lot of time walking around, especially downtown, and comparing things like this thing is different in Vancouver. It's a little better there. Montreal does this a little better. These things are
Mhm.
kind of similar here, and we were just kind of walking down St. Catherine Street, just kind of comparing things and between the two cities. And I remember we got to like the Place des Arts area, like the center of downtown, right by the Desjardins Center, close to
Yes.
the convention center. I'm just like, okay, you guys win. This is awesome because it's just this big pedestrianized area, and I know that this particular weekend there was Oshiega going on, so there was lots of music events going on.
Right.
Chappelle
Yeah.
Rowan was there, so it's
I'm
like
so
this is a
sad I
huge,
couldn't see her.
huge thing going on at the same time as Otakuthon, and all these other events were happening as well. I was running into people downtown, talking to them, and they were all like, "Oh, I'm here for this, I'm here for that," and it's just like it's so cool that all these things are happening right in the middle of summer, and the entire downtown area is so vibrant. And we go to this like the central point of downtown, and it's just this big pedestrianized space. You have these music performances happening just out on big patios that are set up in front of cathedrals, and everything is just so vibrant. Now, I know after spending a few days there, it's not always like that. It was just like that one night, which I think was like one of the opening Oshiega days, that the things were like really picking up. But
So basically, during the I think let's say like the beginning of June till the end of August, that area is going to be like that.
okay, yeah. So again, it's just amazing that even if it's just for a limited time of the year, and I know it's not a pedestrian only area for the entire year. It's usually just during
No,
the summer,
right.
and then once you get into autumn, it's just like the weather is just hell
Yeah,
for the most
exactly.
part, especially in winter. Um, but like the fact that it can even do that for a small part of the year, I think is just amazing. I don't think there are
Oh
very
yeah.
many cities
I
in North America that have that kind of flexibility, or that kind of plaza, uh, central plaza walkable kind of thinking applied to it.
No, no, I absolutely love that. It's something we do here in Montreal.
Yeah, and it's so great. I love it. Montreal is a great city overall. Now to be fair, and as I was saying to you a few times over the weekend, Chris, when you go kind of off script or go to some of the sort of not non-central areas in Montreal, it gets it becomes the reverse very quickly. It's just like I remember I walked into some areas and I'm just like, am I in Florida? It's just like it's like there's certain areas where like you think you can take a shortcut to get from one spot to another, and it's just like no,
No,
if you're not in a car, you have to like go
no.
take
Yeah.
this like 20-minute detour around this way. You think you're going to be able to cross here? No, there's no sidewalk at all. You got to go around over top of like three different highways. Um, but like the central areas where any tourist would stick to, that's all very nice, very central, very walkable. Uh,
Yeah.
and there's so much to do. There's so much food. I love it so much, and I have to say, I can now say with confidence that Montreal is the true anime capital of Canada.
Heck
Vancouver gets,
yeah.
yeah, Vancouver gets featured in anime more and manga more because, of course, it's a Pan-Pacific city, so that makes sense. But Montreal is like culturally that's where it's at. You guys have the history, and just the sort of that more French European mentality that's more amenable to manga and to anime. It just
Right.
it just it just jives better there
Yeah.
than it does in most other.
It's not Friends level, but
Yeah,
definitely the as you mentioned, like the vibe of well, the European comics and mangas have been more of a thing here, I
yeah,
guess. So that made it easier.
and yeah, you have a function. You have access to a functional comic book market,
Right,
or
exactly.
which is just non-existent in North America. The comic book market is just there's manga, and then there's just all this other stuff that people don't
Right.
actually care about. Whereas it's more of a vibrant, broad selection and culture around it. In
Which is very interesting when you think about it, because when I think about comic books nowadays, I will tend to think about, only the North American ones, like the Batman, Superman, whatever DC comics. But like there's so much more out there, like all the Belgium comics, all the France comics, all the Spanish comics, and we just don't think about them because they don't get imported well here in North America.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that the Western superhero comics they're all adapted into movies and
Right.
popular animated show. Well, I mean, obviously manga is adapted into far more popular animated shows compared to superhero stuff, but they have a big cultural currency because of that. But that doesn't translate into people actually reading the comics,
Right.
and the whole industry is just refuses to learn lessons from the rest of the world and continues to suffer and will continue to suffer. I am kind of
Yeah,
amazed that it's even still going
yeah, me
sometimes.
too.
And then even when you go outside of superheroes, it's like, oh, this is just a licensed product from some movie or TV show. This is someone's autobiography. And what's left in English
Right.
language Western comics?
Not
Not a
much.
whole lot. So yeah, you got a whole different kind of culture there backing it. But I just loved in Montreal how there was just so many little hidden anime things. We of course went to La Belle et la Bouffe, which I
Yeah.
has come up on this show before. They have multiple locations, but their location on St. Catherine Street that has the Captain Harlock and Candy Candy bathroom murals. They're easy to miss. They're kind of like, or okay, I didn't see the
Well,
candy. Obviously, I didn't see the Candy Candy one, but the Captain Harlock one
well,
is kind of tucked away in the corner. I got a picture. You got to have your flash on to even have it come through properly. But
it's funny because I've been to that very location many, many times. I just never been to the bathroom, so I didn't realize about the big inside.
It's great, and they've updated their menu. I know they used to have a Goldorak burger, but now they have the what was it again? The
Captain Flam, Calamaro,
yeah,
and
and
I think there was a third one, but I forget which one.
those were the two burgers, but they had they had drinks. They had an Albator and Dragon
Oh
Balls,
yes,
and I got the
yeah,
Calamaro and the Dragon Balls, and you got the Captain Flam and the Albator,
the
and it was
Albator.
all
Yeah,
very good.
oh, it
If
was
you
delicious.
if you like beef, I recommend this restaurant and that particular location. Because
Yes.
and you should go to the St. Catharines location because that's where it's at, and that's also where you'll find Concordia University, where we spent a little time. We went to Fantasia, because that film festival was another thing going on that weekend, and we saw a series of shorts, but we actually we went to the wrong one, not the one that we
Yeah.
intended to go to. There was one series of shorts. It was playing something that you wanted to see specifically.
Yeah, they were having some YouTubers I like who were having a short film. I say YouTubers I like, which is funny because one of them is actually Chris Senna, who's the voice of Sokka in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
he does sketch comedy with his friend, and so they were presenting a film. So they're doing like right now the film festival tour, and I was so excited to be able to see it, and then we went to the wrong show.
yeah. There was another series. We got tickets for a series of Korean shorts instead. I mean, I don't regret seeing that. They were very good. It was fun, just fun seeing those shorts and just seeing anything at Fantasia Film Festival. It seems like a really a very strong, well put together show. Certainly made me envious of our film festivals here. Even VIFF, I think, doesn't quite get the deep cuts that Fantasia does. They were screening Hideaki Anno's Love and Pop on the Saturday
Yes,
night, and we wanted to get tickets to that, but it was like that
it
was
was sold out.
100% sold out. And actually,
Yeah.
that's one thing about VIFF. At least with VIFF, there's a chance that if you get there early enough and go to standby, you can get tickets. But apparently, that's not the case at Fantasia. Things just completely sell out well in advance. Apparently, Ubisoft is a big reason for that.
Yeah.
But I think they're also the big reason why they get a lot of that cool stuff to begin with.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Like they're the biggest sponsor of Fantasia, so they get first dib.
yeah, of course. We walked around Concordia University as well, which is now that is where Otakuthon used to be.
Exactly. That's where
Yeah,
it started. The birthplace of Otakuthon used to be in the well, I forget the name of the pavilion, but that small area I showed you around, it was very cute and local. Well, it was
yeah,
my very first anime convention actually.
yeah. I mean, it's certainly just I could visualize how they would have had that set up. It was just like, oh, this is very similar to what the old anime evolution would have been like at SFU for sure, and
Yeah.
probably areas that were difficult to keep people without badges out of because it's all very open and it's a university and like how do you actually
Right.
enforce that? I could just going through that. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm sure this was definitely a problem at the old Otakuthon. But I mean, one advantage with it is Concordia University is in downtown Montreal, whereas SFU is on top of a mountain in the middle of the suburb. It's a little
Right.
harder to get to. So I'm sure that made the con very accessible for a lot of people and very
Oh
central and
yeah.
very visible compared to other
Absolutely.
places. So, you know, good way to get started. And
Right, because next year is actually the 20th anniversary, if I'm not wrong.
yeah, it's funny. I skipped Otakon for Otakuthon this year, and
Right.
I maybe I timed it badly because this year was Otakon's 30th anniversary. Next year was Otakuthon's
Wow.
25th anniversary, so I got the anniversaries mixed up.
Mixed up,
Maybe I
yeah.
should have done it differently. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll
Oh,
see
you
we'll
can
see
always
how
come
I
back.
feel. Yeah, exactly. I'd love to come back because I had a great time at this
Nice.
convention. So Otakuthon currently in the Montreal Convention Center, great, fantastic location again, right by Place des Arts, right by the Desjardins Center. You got to walk through the Desjardins Center to get to it, and there's a little outside area. I don't think any hotels directly connect to the convention center, but it's still.
So there's I think it's great because there's actually you can get to there from like two different metro stations. There's like one
Mhm.
other metro station like right underneath the convention center.
Yes, that's very convenient.
Yeah.
So if you're commuting to the con, as I'm sure many people are, because hotels are heinously expensive in the area due to all the things going on that weekend. Yeah, you can just commute directly to the con from the metro
Yeah.
on board and just load right in. It's really convenient. The center itself pretty straightforward. It's not like a giant labyrinth or anything. The the lower level is all for ticketing and lineups and like customer service and things like that. So, and the lineups were really long. Thankfully, I got a media badge, so I was able to avoid that for the most part. I wouldn't have. I'm glad I didn't have to stand in that line because it looked like it would have taken
I
a long time. And I think you
I
you
heard
had your badge mailed to you, right?
exactly. So
Yeah.
I actually heard that the line wasn't as bad as it could have been because most people nowadays get their badge shipped.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're a 30,000 plus convention with enough volunteers, then that's about the point when it tends to be feasible to have a
Right.
badge mail out program. If you're smaller
Exactly.
than
Yeah.
that, they're usually not going to bother. When you're that
Right.
size, usually it's going to work out a little better. And it sounded like that.
Also, for what it's worth, I don't know if other conventions do that. Probably they do. But when you so in my case, it was they you can do like a group order for badges.
Hmm.
So in my case, it was my friend who actually did a group order. And that way, so she was the one who got the badges delivered. So it's probably also easier that way.
Yeah. So they give you a lot of options, and I know
Right.
the lines apparently have been quite bad at Otakuthon in the past, but apparently
Yes.
sounds like it. Even though the lines were really long, they moved pretty efficiently. They seem to have a really good staff working on that. I so I made a mistake. I went there. I did not. My shoes were not broken in very well. So I I wound up needing some bandages on the first day, and I did have a lot of trouble getting help with that. I tried to get I couldn't find the pharmacy in the area. I was shocked that IGA or a grocery store didn't have a pharmacy inside of it. I don't know if that's just an IGA thing or more of a trend of how
It,
grocery stores are in that city.
it might be just an IGA thing.
Yeah, it might just be an IGA thing. Um, but I tried to get help getting some bandages. I got directed to the customer service line, which, I was hoping to avoid those lines, but in this case, I got a little taste of it. It took quite a while to get to me, and then when I when I got to the customer service person, they just pointed me to the convenient info booth upstairs, who had what I needed, and it's just like, oh, I wish the
Darn.
staff member I had talked to the first time had just pointed me to the
No.
info booth. But
Yeah.
when I'll give them a break because this is this is the largest anime convention in Canada, and one of the largest in North America. 36,000 people is what I think they counted this year, which would
Yes,
I
I
think that
believe
would
so.
make
Yeah.
Otakuthon like second or third in the continent. So I'll give them a break for for having for this very large um,
Yeah.
largely staffed convention, not knowing exactly how to point
Yeah.
someone around for an obscure inquiry like that.
Right.
Oh
And to be fair, like there are a crazy ton of departments
yeah,
within the convention.
exactly.
So I guess it would make sense that a like random staff probably
Yeah,
like wouldn't know. Yeah.
and small complaint, and this is not something that's going to affect most people who go to the convention, but there was a media room. It was so hard to find the media room, and also hard to find someone who knew where the media room was. And also, even if you did find a person who did, it was difficult for them to explain how to find it. They had to like take me there in the end.
Was it like underneath, like, yeah, you had to take like stairs to get
I
there?
had to take stairs to get there, and it was
Yeah,
actually
okay.
overlooking the main area, so it wasn't
Yeah,
even closed
okay.
off.
Yeah, so,
Um,
so that's where around where the green room used to be, or I think it might still be there actually.
I do not know. I think
Okay.
there was a green room that was something different. I went there by accident.
Okay.
I was really hoping the media room would be like more closed off. So like so that's another thing. Not a lot of people wearing masks at this convention, which
Yeah.
was kind of surprising. I kept mine on. I was really hoping the media area would be a spot where I could take mine off.
Mm,
And I did not feel comfortable doing so. But
yeah.
in the end, either way, I did not get COVID. I did get a summer cold though, which is still lingering a little bit. I think that was one of my souvenirs from Montreal,
From
unfortunately. But it
Montreal. Yeah.
certainly could have been worse though.
Right.
But yeah, that was a little disappointing to see. But
Yeah.
that's not really so much the. I'm not expecting any convention to actually enforce a mask policy at this point because it's just
No, but still, it was, very disappointing. And you know what? I don't know if she's gonna be listening to this or she will recognize herself, but shout out to that one girl who actually was able to give me a mask on the first day because I left the office, I went home, changed real quick, and I forgot my mask on the way to the
yeah.
con. And it's when I arrived at the con, I was like, ah shit, I forgot my mask. So it was the scramble to try to find a mask somewhere in the vicinity of the con. And again, it's the same thing as the pharmacy thing. Like no one was selling a mask in the
Yeah.
area. And thank God I found somebody at the con who was wearing a mask, and I took a chance. I asked her if she had spare mask, and she did. And then yeah, so
Good
shout
chance.
out, shout out to her.
Good chance that anybody who is wearing a mask is going to have spares. So
Right.
that was yeah, glad to hear that worked out. So just so going back just to the convention center again, pretty nicely laid out. It was for the most part easy to find things, even though the way the rooms were labeled was a little confusing because you had like room 513 AB like DF, and then another one was like CG or something.
Yeah.
It's a little weird. It didn't take too long to get used to it. One thing that I discovered on like the last day, I didn't realize this until the very end, but most of the convention is on odd numbered floors. You go up and you go to floor
Yes.
5, then you go to floor 7.
Right.
Those are what the escalators will take you to. But if you go like
Yes.
down the stairs into one of in the levels in between,
Yeah.
it's just all washrooms. It's just
Yes.
a huge row of washrooms. And I found that I'm just like, oh my god, I wish I had realized this from the beginning. This would have saved me a lot of stress
Oh
in
yeah,
finding
yeah.
a washroom in some situations. That is like just in terms of building design, that is such a great idea for
Right.
for a convention center that's going to host large events like this. Just having a massive row of washrooms. Oh, absolutely exquisite.
Yeah.
Cannot think of a better touch you can add to an event like this. So I was also surprised with Otakuthon that we actually got a swag bag. Most conventions don't do this anymore. Not only a swag bag, but it's like a custom swag bag made for Otakuthon. Good quality little bag too, and you get like a printed schedule, printed map, info book. This almost seems retro. Like this is what
You
you'd
know they
expect of
ran
a
out.
convention 10 years ago.
They ran out on day one, I think.
Well, I mean that's also what you'd expect of an anime convention.
Right.
um, but yeah, I mean that was really cool. I also got, I think as media, I got some bonus stuff. I got a pen and a notepad too, and I
Yeah,
used
that's
them.
really cool.
Uh,
That's really
and
cool.
and also I also got as a free gift I got a water bottle, which
Yeah.
I leaked, so was not
Oh
maybe
no.
it leaked a little bit because I didn't.
Okay.
I think you had to
To really like
tighten it
screw it tightly.
really screw it
Yeah.
on tight. But
Yeah.
it was still cool. It keeps water cool, so I certainly can't complain. I needed another water
Very
bottle
nice.
anyway, so that was great to see. And also,
Nice.
in related to them now being a very large convention, I was surprised to see that they were using RFID readers at the entrances, where
Yes.
you tap in and out like you do out of like a transit station or something
Uh-huh.
with your pass. And I was just like, wow, I think the only conventions I've heard of using this are like Anime Expo and San Diego Comic Con.
Oh, does
Certainly,
the X do that now?
I think they're definitely the only convention in Canada that would have something like this set up. I don't know how. Yeah, I mean Yeah, there weren't people watching, so certainly I think you could walk in without tapping it and no one would do
Oh,
anything about it.
I mean, when I entered the con on Friday, that's absolutely what happened. I entered the con that without, I forgot that you have to type in, right? So I just walked right in.
Yeah. So functionally, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to be doing, whether it's just keeping track of attendance or
I think it's to keep track of attendance.
yeah. But
I don't know if when you left on Sunday, if it was well, so I left earlier than you on Sunday. When I got out, the one at the main entrance downstairs, completely stopped working for
oh
the
wow.
exit.
So
So, so they just were like, you know, just pass, you know. So,
that reminds me of another funny thing that happened at this con. They had 18 plus wrist bracelets for
oh
the 18
yeah,
plus events. On the first day, they just ran out, and they're just like, "Yeah, whatever, just don't worry about it." It's like, "Are you
yeah.
gonna check? Are you gonna check ID at the entrance of the events?" And just like, "Don't worry about it."
So,
So I
so
think, uh,
so not to like to get ahead too much, but you know, for your panel,
yeah.
they were checking ID.
Oh, they were okay. So I did.
Yeah.
I know I mentioned at the beginning that they didn't accept my Bionics panel. I submitted 5 panels. 4 of them got rejected. The one that they did accept was my Amazing Anime Deaths panel. Yes, it is a complete knockoff of Daryl Surratt's Craziest Anime Deaths, but people love it and no one else is doing it here, so that's why I do it. Um,
It was great.
and I guess they were, and it was after midnight on Saturday, so we wound up getting a hotel just for that night so we could crash at the con and
Yeah.
not have to commute back to your place. And it worked out well, I would say. But
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, so I guess they were checking ID on that.
Yeah, they were
Um,
checking IDs. Yeah.
yeah, it was actually interesting because I did that panel and I noticed that on the schedule, a lot of the shows that I featured, like Angel Cop and Genocyber and Crying Freeman, they were actually screening those shows at the con at that same night as well. It was interesting scheduling there. I got a great
Yeah,
turnout despite that overlap. But those shows were actually rated 16 plus and not 18 plus at this
18
convention,
plus.
which actually makes me realize like, oh, I probably could have just made this panel 16 plus. Because
Yeah.
it seemed the rule. It seems like the rule at Otakuthon is that you only need to be 18 plus if your panel actually contains explicit pornography, or
Right.
and which was not really the case with mine. It's not that surprising. I know that generally Canadian conventions are a lot laxer with that kind of thing than American conventions are. But it seems Otakuthon is definitely a different level of lax when it comes to that stuff. But it was
Mm.
yeah, okay. So it's good to know they were checking ID for the 18 plus stuff outside of
Yeah.
the rooms. But yeah, it was kind of funny that they just ran out of 18 plus bracelets on the first day.
And it might be like an oversight on them because when you look at the scheduling, the number of 18 plus panels on scheduled after a certain time, you would think they would expect a lot of people to want
Yeah,
to go
because
to those.
most of the events after a certain hour are 18 plus.
Right.
But I mean, maybe I mean, this is a convention where it seems that most people commute to it, so
Right.
perhaps they underestimated how many people would stick around late at
You'll
night.
stick
I don't know
around.
how
Yeah,
it's
that's
been in
true.
previous years. Yeah, that's. I also went to Anime Revolution and Erevo the weekend after. We'll talk a little about that convention after. But
Yeah.
there's a convention that has some difficulty retaining people after a certain hour. And again, I don't know how Otakuthon may have compared in the past, but Otakuthon is a con that has plenty to do at all hours, even past midnight. So it's not
Oh yeah.
surprising that you have huge crowds even late at night. They have a manga library. I didn't really check it out in detail, but it seemed to be pretty popular and gave people things to do even after
Mhm.
the exhibitors hall closes. There was a huge gaming area. Again, this is the Ubisoft city, so it's not surprising that you're going to have that kind of internal support to have a big gaming room, kind of similar to SakuraCon in Seattle, has a massive gaming room because there's so much gaming stuff going on there. So of course you're going to have people who have the resources and know how to sort of pull that off in a giant capacity. So it was just cool to see those things. They seemed to have a cafe that was running pretty late at the
Yes.
top
Yeah, they
floor
have
as well.
yeah.
The I didn't try them, but the from what I could see, the prices didn't seem to be like quite the extortionist prices you typically find at on-site convention spaces. So
So,
that was a pretty
so
cool thing to see.
I haven't been to the cafe in a long time, so to be honest, I don't know how it compares.
Yeah, I don't know. You know what? For the purposes of journalism, maybe I should have tried some of their food,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I didn't. I stuck with other restaurants in the area. I guess to talk a little about just the guests and the events that took place. So on Friday there were panels with some animators. So they had Takahiko Abiru. So he was an animation director on Hunter x Hunter, on Vinland Saga, on a bunch of other other similar shows. He had a couple of panels, and they were pretty interesting. Most of the questions he got were very scripted, and he was there in participation with Twin Engine Studios. They seem to sort of be hosting him and the other director that was there, who is Shigeyoshi Tsukahara. He's a cinematic director. He did two films, Kuriyakaba and Kuramero Kagari, which were sort of a pair of films that came out in recent years. And
Oh,
apparently he had been working on them for a long time. I have not caught them. They were screening at the event. They are also on Crunchyroll, so you can watch them there. They seem to be very influenced by like World War II style storytelling and art. They seem very influenced by Kamishibai storytelling. You know, those kind of storybook storytellings where they'd wheel a cart around and someone would just show a series of pictures and do storytelling. That's where the golden bat came from
well,
in manga and anime history. It seemed very influenced by that kind of aesthetic.
okay.
So they had panels with those two animators. What I found interesting with Abiro, even though a lot of the questions they got were just kind of scripted, he was doing a sketch from Hunter x Hunter, and that's the best thing you can see at any anime convention is an animator
Right.
actually drawing things,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is always
Oh,
great.
I'm sad I missed that.
Yeah. But he was, of course, they got questions about things like, salaries for animators and workload. I was kind of surprised at Abiru. He seemed a little glib about that subject, just about
Oh, really?
workloads and the workloads he would put on people who were working under him. But he did make an interesting comment about salaries for animators, that he started with a very low salary. And one thing that has been apparently driving up salaries for animators in Japan is the influx of foreign talent, because of course foreign
Oh,
talent
yeah.
has to get paid more, and they need
Right,
that support.
absolutely.
And actually, it seems that a lot of that foreign talent is shoring up more money to pay domestic animators more as well. That's an interesting observation I don't think I've heard before.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And they also did a panel with Abiru and Sukahara where they're just like comparing the approaches to TV animation and film animation. It was a little ill-advised because neither had worked on the other. Abiru had really only done television animation, and Sukahara had only done film. So they didn't really have
Okay.
any actual comment on
Right.
on how the others worked. But it was still neat to sort of hear their perspectives on that, and just sort of, even though it was all again just kind of a little scripted by with the presentation as dictated by Twin Engine Studios, but it was still great to see them getting actual animators, hearing them talk about the animation process, and especially it was great to actually see the great turnout that they were getting. They're not big names, but there's definitely an interest at this convention for the actual art and creation of anime, which is
Oh,
not
yeah.
not always the case. Sometimes these animator panels can be very sparsely attended, even for big
Really?
names at some conventions. And I was glad to see that
Oh.
was not the case at Otakuthon.
No,
No,
Otakuthon has been bringing in animators and producers for quite a while now, and
mhm.
they've always very well. They've always been received very well.
What I also found interesting, so Otakuthon, even though they are the largest anime convention in Canada. What they like to boast is that they are the largest bilingual convention in North America, which is a bit weird
Yeah,
because I don't think they have a lot of
yeah.
competition with that.
No,
I think
no.
G Anime was a bilingual convention. I'm assuming that
Right.
there's Anime Ottawa. It sounds like there's some drama in the Gatineau, Ottawa area that has resulted in this Anime
This
Ottawa
anime Ottawa, yeah.
popping up. I don't know too much about that. I've just heard some rumblings. I'm assuming that Anime
Mm,
Ottawa is also a bilingual convention based on
mm,
vaguely what
could
I've been gathering. I could be wrong on that,
right.
but
I guess in a sense that Daishikon also could be counted as an
yeah,
sort of bilingual.
yeah. We'll get to the Nadeshikon and the Nadeshiko Club later. My assumption that was that because it's in Quebec City that it would be French only, but I know that the Nadeshiko Club does have some English language participants and
Right.
members who present. So that actually it wouldn't surprise me if it is bilingual as well. But
I think I did a panel at a Daishikon before and it was in English.
oh, okay. Okay, well that might answer my question then. Perhaps I did not do enough research into that.
Yeah.
Nadeshikon, definitely something I'd like to check out in the future. But Otakuthon, no question, no question that they're the biggest bilingual convention. I
Oh yeah.
think that
Oh
the
yeah.
fact that they're the biggest convention in Canada by a fair margin is the bigger boast, though. But again, they're bilingual, so they advertise a lot of their panels as being bilingual, and you can't help but wonder how that would work. I don't know if there is a good way to make it work, but you're definitely not going to get a full experience if you only speak English or French or only one of the two languages.
Right.
Like these animator like the animator panels for instance, they were only the actual commentary was only translated into English for them. Where it got interesting was with the voice actor guests. So they had Saki Fujita, who is she was the voice that was used as the basis for Hatsune Miku. She's also Noshitan in the Deer anime.
That's right.
She's in the Deer
That's right.
anime. And a lot of other things. So she was very popular. I saw her. She was very funny. I enjoyed her Q&A. I know her second Q&A was apparently canceled because she was having vocal issues or health
Right.
problems. But they replaced it with another autograph session, which was a nice compromise. Um, but they had Saki Fujita, Nobuyuki Hiyama, who is I guess
Viral and Gurren
Viral Girl
uh,
Lagan. Um,
Cheryl and Adamus team.
yes, yeah, he's lots of great roles. Yuriko Yamaguchi, she is Ritsuko in Evangelion and Nico Robin in One Piece. And then Nobutoshi Kana, that was actually the guest I was most looking forward to because in addition to being Guts in Berserk, he has also been the voice of Knuckles the Echidna for 20 years with that franchise. But what was neat was that these Q&As were all boasted as being bilingual. And how that actually worked is that you'd have a translator. That translator it was up to them how they would translate the initial comments, whether they would be in English or in French, the initial things that the voice actor would say to introduce themselves. So for Yuriko Yamaguchi, her translator basically opted to do everything in French up until the Q&A started. So I was doing my best to try to understand what she was saying in Japanese, and I couldn't catch most of that. So it's interesting that they were boasted as bilingual, but you didn't know that which one you go to, whether you were going to get English or French as the initial comments. But when you get to the Q&A, though, it is a total free-for-all language-wise. People were talking in English, French, Japanese, and typically it would only be translated back into the language that the person asked the question in.
The
So
question, yeah.
yeah, so it's definitely neat if you only speak one language, you kind of miss out on a lot
Yeah,
when you're
it's
there for the
funny though,
full
because I
hour.
think Kana's so Kana didn't have the same translator on both days. And the translator he got for the second day couldn't speak French.
Yeah,
So So that pretty much restricted the questions to just English mostly.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it was advertised as bilingual. So,
Right,
yeah, I guess that's something you have to take with a grain of salt when
right.
you're going to the guest panels here, because there's gonna they're really gonna yeah, they're really gonna play it by ear when it comes to
Uh-huh.
which translator they get and how they how if they speak all the languages, how they feel like translating it at that particular moment. So it was still interesting to see that. And the other guest they got, of course, was Toshio Furukawa, the voice of Piccolo,
Ace from One Piece.
and yeah, and Ace in One Piece. And you can tell that this guy does lots of conventions in North
Oh
America
yeah.
because
Oh yeah.
he has a whole PowerPoint at the beginning outlining all of his roles, and
Yeah.
based on his comments, he knows exactly which ones are popular with North American fans and which one North American fans have never heard of. So
Right.
he's he's done this a lot, which I found was kind of fun. But all these Q&As really still really great to attend. It's it's just nice to hear them speaking and engaging with fans, even if you don't always understand the language that they're speaking. And again, this is who needs to know English or who needs to know French when we all speak the universal language of anime anyway, right? So
Exactly.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So regarding fan panel, so of course my panel, Amazing Anime Deaths, was great. No one's
Yeah.
disputing
No,
this.
it was awesome.
Yeah, and
It was awesome.
good crowd for a midnight panel too. So there's also the fan panels. So I popped into a few. There was one on like female gaze of BL. A couple other ones I popped into. I found that the English panels were okay. Definitely mix of quality a lot of the time.
Hmm.
It's kind of similar to what you see at other Canadian conventions I've been to. What I did consistently find was that the French language panels were much better, even if you don't understand what they're saying. There definitely seemed to be better presentation, better depth of discussion for the French language panels. I think there seems to be a greater culture and higher expectation for those ones, and that is especially apparent with the Nadeshko Club. I'm surprised you had apparently not heard of the Nadeshko Club before this
I
con,
had
because
never heard of them before.
they have quite a reputation. So these are
Yeah.
the keepers of knowledge in like the francophone community, mostly Gen Xers, but they're a big club that has a range of ages. They've been operating for a long time. They were the founders of Nadeshcon in Quebec City, and man, they put on incredible shows. They have
Oh yeah.
a range of speakers, specifically Vince Bergeron, who I know. He's actually been one of my main sources of information for French language anime on this show for many years. I've brought him up a few times in the past, but that guy has his depth of knowledge is just so incredible, and the way he contextualizes anime, he doesn't just talk about anime. He'll show you like, oh, he's always has this old footage of old television shows, of old news stories, of old ads that add to that sort of that context for old content, for older content, and he really brings it to life in that way. And the best panel, and I think the panel that people like the most, was their Remarkable Forgotten Ones anime to be
Yes.
rediscovered. This was the 11th
Yes.
installment, I believe, and it's so great. They have like
It's brilliant.
their custom Nadeshko Club intro at the beginning. They
Oh,
do
I
a
loved it.
full intro, and the whole thing is formatted like a variety show on Radio Canada.
It was
Everyone has like they all have their like quirks and personalities. They all talk about different types of shows that they like, and the idea is that each person will highlight a series of not necessarily like unknown anime, but more obscure anime
forgotten.
that
Yeah,
forgotten
more
ones
obscure.
that people that might not be as a popular knowledge now. And yeah, it's just so great the way they format things, the way they contextualize things. I don't understand most of what they're saying or what their specific jokes are, but the vibe comes through even if you don't speak French. And
Yeah.
their stuff was like absolutely the highlight of this con for me. There was also a review of the year 1978, which, of course, as we all know, is anime's most important year. It didn't go quite as strictly with the variety show format with that one, but you get like lots of historical footage, lots of ads and news programs, and talk about movies that were coming out at the time, music that was popular at the time. It just gives that really rich context to that period that really brings it to life. And there was also I also caught their 2 hour panel on Sunday, which was about the Moe military, which is
Yeah, I'm sad I missed that one.
yeah, it was so good. It just goes through the evolution of Moe, goes through the evolution of military themes in anime, how they converge and how they like kind of mutate horribly in some ways in recent years. It's just so rich and in depth. It was and really funny. And yeah, it was a great time going to all those panels. I would like to go to I honestly, if I hope to come back to Otakuthon again in the future, and their panels are like the main reason I'd love to do so. Apart from just how great of a city Montreal is, it's yeah, great stuff. I'd love to check out Nadeshikon too, although I am intimidated about going to Quebec City because I don't speak French.
So definitely, I said like so. I did run a panel there. I believe it was in English, but most of the con like is definitely more French geared.
Yes, of course. Um, yeah, I thought Otakuthon being a bilingual convention, I thought there'd be like a very big divide between the English and French portions. But even though like the English content differed from the French content a lot, it didn't seem like there was a big gulf between them. It seemed like there's a lot of
Right.
overlap. People would go to both. They would understand both. So it just kind of interesting to just see how that all kind of played out. How just to get a feel for how people navigate that in a convention, and probably the fandom outside of that as well. Um, and even like the French panels, they would they would often use English subtitled clips. They would often refer to French shows by the English name or French or use English terms for things, which I found gave a bit of an interesting insight to the way French Canadian fandom operates with that kind of thing, because it seems that English terminology still plays a big role in in the way things are discussed.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Yesterday, I was watching. I saw a thread on Twitter about, and maybe you've seen it too. It's about
I
the
don't
way
I don't read Twitter anymore.
you know on Twitter anymore. Okay, so anyway, it was about the way that when sometimes people are bilingual and they speak another language, they'll kind of like they'll adapt the way they say words, and it was this whole discussion about like being bilingual and all that. And there was this particular tweet that I really liked said monolingual some of the monolingual people wouldn't be able to survive Quebec because in Quebec you can have a conversation where you speak French but you interject so many English in it that it could be confusing.
Yeah, that I definitely got that vibe throughout.
Yeah.
Even just Montreal. I'm sure that it gets even more kind of unpredictable outside of there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I've been told all my life, I could get by fine in Montreal. Everyone will always greet you with bonjour first, and then you
Yeah.
have to just start speaking English, and they'll be able to speak English. Good time overall. We also checked out the new UFO Robo Grandizer anime as well, which is
Yes.
it's okay.
Oh,
it,
it's special.
yeah, directed by Gundam Seed director Mitsuo Fukuda. It's yeah, they make some choices in that. It's
Wait, hold on. It's it's by Fukuda? I thought it was Taniguchi.
yeah. So it turns out we were wrong about that. Goro Taniguchi. So he of course directed Back Arrow, which is kind of like UFO Robo. It's kind of like a remake of UFO Robo Grandizer. Yeah, the first we watched like the first two. It seemed okay. I think it's kind of. I watched a couple more. I think it's losing steam a little bit. I think this may have been. I think the quality of this one may have been a little front loaded just to keep MBS happy. Uh,
Right.
and that's probably why you're not able to watch that streaming legally right now. But it was
Probably not.
still a fun way to sort of cap off a weekend in Montreal.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also one thing that is absolutely worth highlighting from Otakuthon is maybe one of their most famous headline events, which is the Impossible Sex Positions panel. So this is so if you've never heard of this panel before, basically they will put they have assigned teams. People volunteer to do this. It's not audience participation. They have set competing teams do this. They will show an image at the front of stick figures in a sex position that is possible but extremely difficult to practically maintain for 10 seconds. And they will have the teams try to imitate that sex position, and they have to like thrust the whole for 10 seconds straight and not fall over and be able to maintain the position for that time. And it's run like a contest, and it is as fun to watch as you would expect. And also, that is only a 16 plus panel as well. It is not an 18 plus event at this convention.
Yeah.
I thought that they would be showing like actual images from hentai or doujinshi that people would have to recreate. Maybe it started that way and they toned it down just so they can get the rating down to 16
probably
plus.
did, yeah.
I'm not sure, because
Yeah.
that would be like that would be how it would be connected to anime or manga. But the end
Right.
result is still a fun thing, a hilarious thing. You will not see at any other convention, or at least not that I'm aware of. And the line getting into that was a huge disaster as well, as you might expect.
Oh, really?
This one is very popular, but thankfully I was able to flash my media badge and catch some of it.
Nice.
So
Power of a media badge.
yes. So Otakuthon, fantastic time at this convention. I wish that hotel rooms weren't so expensive, because I think that's a big barrier for people coming from out of town for this thing.
Yeah.
Definitely, I will. If I come again in the future, I'll have to continue to find ways around that. At least in the future, it looks like the metro will finally come straight from the airport and take you to downtown, though, which it does not currently do.
At the moment, no.
At the moment,
No.
but
Hopefully soon.
yeah, in a few years, I think all Montreal, like in every city in Canada, the current transit expansions are probably way over budget and being delayed. So I think probably give it some time, but it'll all work great soon. But as I alluded to earlier, I did go to another convention the week after, because I'm insane. I went to Anime Revolution, or Annie Revo, in Vancouver, which is a convention I brought up many times on this podcast. So my expectation was that I would go to Otakuthon and it would be fantastic and great. I would go to Annie Revo and it would be not so great. And that more or less was the case. Annie Revo is, if it is known for nothing else, it is quite a mediocre convention in many ways. And they keep having consistent problems every year that don't always get addressed adequately or at all, or sometimes they will address the problems at the convention and then just let the problems happen again in the future, and it's frustrating. This is a convention, has a nice downtown venue, but it continues to not take advantage of that venue. So I mentioned how Otakuthon is great because it has events going on into the night. It keeps people engaged, gives people reason to stick around. So this actually, the problem with Annie Revo is that they do not have a gaming area outside of the exhibitors hall. This is a huge problem, because you have your gaming area in the exhibitors hall that not only takes up space in the exhibitors hall and makes it more crowded, but it also misses the point of that, because the point of a gaming area is that it gives you something to do when you want to get away from the exhibitors hall, when you want to get away from the panels and the programming, you just want to go chill out and play games. It's not supposed to be an attraction. You're supposed to just have it off to the side, just to get people to stick around, give them something to do. The problem is that when it's in the exhibitors hall, the exhibitors hall closes down, there's no more gaming.
Yeah. Oh
And
my God. Okay, yeah.
there were also no screening rooms this year, which I will, as we've actually mentioned on this podcast before, that is not a unique problem. A lot of conventions in the U.S. and Canada are just nixing their screening rooms entirely,
Screening rooms.
because
Yeah.
Crunchyroll charges too much and it's difficult to manage. Now they did have one screening room last year where they were showing mostly discotheque things. Yeah, I don't think that they had a good justification for not doing that again this year. They cited like technical problems, and I think it just means that they don't they don't have they don't want to direct staff towards that, which
Right.
is like, I think that's a bad excuse. You need to have something like that going, even if it's a small room, just to keep people engaged, give them something to do.
Engage. Yeah.
Um,
Do something. Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
replace
You mentioned they don't have a manga library
They
either,
don't have
right?
a manga library. So what they
Yeah.
did was they replaced the screening room with a chill out room, which is not a bad idea on
Oh.
paper. But
Okay.
the problem is that it was a very low effort kind of thing, because when you do a chill out room at a convention, the idea is supposed to be that it's like a low sensor. It should be a low sensory area, and I don't think that was like being enforced in their chill out room. So
Uh,
if they're going to do that, they definitely need to be proactive in sort of enforcing that, making sure people are quiet, or not being overly stimulating. And again, if you're not doing that, then you're just having just an empty room people can go into. Which again, you're just doing that because you don't want to have staff going in there. Again, not a bad idea, but you need to execute it properly if you're going to do that. They do have the one thing that they do kind of have going after hours is the Vanpla room. So Vanpla is the local Vancouver Gunpla community, which is very quite
okay.
strong. They kind of they run that room, they keep it going, and they kind of self manage it, and they're a big enough group that they can do that, and they do a pretty good job. If you want to go build, you just try and experiment with building Gunpla. There's a whole room for doing that, and it's great. They have panels running in there as well. It's not a huge room, but again, it is something that you can do. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot, and the problem is that they don't have a lot of programming running after a certain hour. This was better than last year. Last year they had they had hour gaps in between panels after a certain hour, probably just out of the assumption that people weren't going to stick around. Which
So, so
that's
you were mentioning something related to that with Otakuthon being that we were talking about, locals and the need to commute.
mhm.
So how does it actually work in Vancouver?
So
Like, do
it's similar here. I think most people who go to this con do commute to it. They have
right,
like I think they have a hotel block for Annie Revo, but it's smaller than you'd find at a lot of conventions. Like Sakuracon has a really big hotel block. Something like Otakon has a huge hotel block. It's heavily dependent on hotels because
right,
so many people come from out of town, and people come from out of town for this con as well. But they're more likely going. If you live locally, you're probably not going to get the hotel. You're going to take the SkyTrain or the Metro home after a certain
right.
hour, and I mean it runs late, so it's not like staying late would be a problem. But if there's not a lot to do, people are just going to go home. They're not gonna have a
Mm,
hotel room that they can go back to and then maybe come back to the con
right,
when something they want to check out is going on later. Um, Even if people who get hotels, they might get a hotel in like Burnaby or New Westminster or something, and commute to the hotel because it's just so much cheaper if you do
cheaper,
it out
yeah.
there. It's hard to get people to stick around when they don't have a hotel. And but even if people are commuting, if you have those things going that you can get people to stick around, uh, it will it will go a long way. And I kind of felt that because I did two. So I because I'm insane. I did 6 panels at this convention. They went well for the most part. So I did 2 late night panels. I did Anime Deaths again here, and I did Anime Grindhouse, which is kind of a feature of old OVAs and movies, and kind of mashed together with a anime hell knockoff kind of get up. It was in a smaller panel room. It went great. The audience loved it, and people who went to that panel came to my other panels because they liked that one so much. That one was on Friday night. and the people were just like frantically taking pictures and like taking notes of the shows I was featuring because they wanted to, there's that
Check them out.
that thirst for old anime that is often ignored at this and many other conventions. And people were like talking to me after, trying to get information on what I showed so that they could go check it out themselves. All went really well. But I did this panel back in like 2019, and back then it filled the large panel room to capacity, and it had an overflow line. And that was at like 10 o'clock, or that was like 11 o'clock at night. Here I was in a smaller room, and it was like maybe 3/4 full. So people were sticking around, I think, more than the convention expected. But it's just, I think that the number of people who are sticking around late is dwindling at this convention. And a big part is because they're not addressing that problem of not having things to do outside of the exhibitors hall and the panel rooms. And a big reason for that is because if you go, like, going back to what I said first, the Vancouver Convention Center, beautiful venue, can be well utilized, but they only have 2 stories of it. They have the exhibitors area at the bottom, and they have the first floor. There are 2 more floors that they don't have access to. And one reason why Anime Revolution has consistently been able to maintain an audience and a crowd is because from the beginning, I told you a bit about the history of how Anime Evolution died
Right. Yeah.
in 2010, and then this was a for-profit convention that popped up a couple of years later, seeing that opportunity. And like their very first year, they made sure to nail down a couple of key things that Anime Evolution had failed to deliver during their time as the convention in Vancouver, which is they managed to get a voice actor guest from Japan. They got Joji Nakata. Despite being, a West Coast city, Anime Evolution never managed to do that during their whole history. And they also got Canada Place, so the east side of the convention center, nice downtown venue. And even though the convention was quite poor in just about every other regard, they correctly identified those things that people wanted in the convention, and they have continued to focus on that, pour their resources into that, and they have moved over to the nicer West venue. But the problem is that it's still really expensive, and it seems that even though this is a for-profit con and they're trying to, squeeze every penny that they can, they still can't apparently afford that second story. If they could get that second story, it would solve so many problems because they could easily move the gaming area out of the exhibitors hall. They could.
What's the attendance?
So that's the other thing about Anime Revolution. We don't really know. So
Okay.
I'm bad at judging crowds. I would pin Anime Revolution at about maybe a little less than a third the size of maybe about a third of the size of Otakuthon. So
That's small.
yeah, so somewhere between 10 to 15,000 people. I really doubt that it's larger than 15,000 people. So
Oh wow.
yeah,
Okay.
that one story, it feels kind of empty sometimes. Like it's not full of people all the time. But
That is really surprising to
yeah.
hear.
So again, there's a lot of factors in this. And I mean, when we were in Montreal, I was telling you about the whole history of anime conventions, how there's
Yeah.
different, and there's different factions. There's been all these problems with Anime Revolution over the years, a lot of which we've talked about on this show. And there's a lot of people who really hate Anime Revolution, a lot of people who are neutral on it. And I know I was telling you about a lot of things that happened in the past. You were kind of rolling your eyes at a lot of it because it seemed like you had heard these stories before in other cities.
Right.
And a lot of the problems are linked to the fact that Anime Revolution is a for-profit convention, and it's going to influence the way that they do things. They also run, if you've heard of this event, it was used to be called International Fan Fest, and then
Yes.
Anime Toronto. So they are the people behind that. So they're trying to expand into other cities. And it's actually funny because Anime Toronto is now being taken over, or not being taken over, it's being transferred to someone else. And the head of Annie Revo just made a big deal about it and says, we're now going to be doing Annie Revo Toronto, and then someone else is going to run Anime Toronto. So it's just
Anime
like,
Toronto,
so you
yeah.
have these, you're trying to start up 2 for-profit conventions in Toronto. Why? Like, it's very puzzling.
I'll say this though, I did enjoy IFF.
IFF, okay. So, from what I understand, IFF it gives you a taste of what things are like at Anime Revolution. With
Okay.
so, yeah. And they do. I mean, they again going back to knowing what the audience wants in Vancouver. They do often put all their resources into getting good voice actor guests
Japanese guest.
and vocal guests, and that's where their money goes. But other things suffer. Like they're very focused on voice actors. They don't bring in animators or manga artists or other people who work in the industry in different capacities, because all their focus is just on the popular voice actors. Noting how they're trying to get into the Toronto market. It's been interesting that nobody else has tried to start an anime convention in Vancouver. It has been 10 years since there's been an attempt to make like another multi-day con here. I know it's hard. You'll probably lose money the first couple of years, but I still thought that someone would have tried by now. Especially like in the spring. There's like nothing going on in the spring. It's like that's the time you try to do that. But this is where we're at right now. I don't know. Maybe if they make money in Toronto, maybe they'll be able to afford that second level. But that's causing an issue. And then even then, would they want to keep running the screening rooms again? Would they put the resources into opening something like a manga library? I'm not sure. They really need more stuff like that, because they're again and the con stops at midnight too. There's nothing that runs past midnight. Because people
is there anything? Could it be that there's a city mandate about noise?
It is possible that the convention center won't let them run past midnight. I don't know the answer to that question. So the other thing about Anime Revolution is that every few years there's some kind of like big scandal that happens, and that kind of happened this year. Although whether you call it a scandal, I think some people are doing that. I don't think that's really the case. So what happened is, as you probably know, we have a very large number of idol groups here in Vancouver. Lots of cities, most cons I think have some kind of idol showcase at their conventions, because you have local groups that try to do idol performances. That is that is a really big thing in Vancouver compared to other cities. And that the big reason for that is because there was an amateur idol group in Vancouver that got signed on to a record label in Japan. So, if one group can do it, it's understandable that other groups think that they can pull it off as well. So you have all this very intense competition. And then there's been a problem for many years of idol groups trying to like try to sign up for panel spaces at different conventions. Anything that they can get to just promote their group or do performances if they can't get into the actual proper idol showcases. Because there's just not enough proper events to meet the demand for what was trying to be done. So it's a really big deal. There's lots of focus on it. So what happened is that at the idol showcase of Anime Revolution, there was a bit of a nightmare scenario where someone actually dislocated their leg who was supposed to perform. So this was obviously a big problem, and there's been a lot of, and it took a long time for the ambulance to arrive. They had to actually cancel the idol showcase because of this. And what happened? And so this was obviously going to get a lot of attention, and lots of people are pointing fingers at the way Annie Revo handled this. They said that the communication was bad. They did not properly treat a person who was injured on stage, and of course they canceled the showcase outright. And what happened was a bunch of the idols then went outside the Olympic torch and performed out there instead. And there are lots of criticisms you could throw at Annie Revo. They've handled lots of things badly in the past, and I mean, I don't blame a lot of people for not giving them the benefit of the doubt, but and I thought when I first heard about this, I was like, oh, Annie Revo probably handled this very badly. They did the bare minimum. Now that I've looked into it more and seen what people are saying and heard about some things behind the scenes, I you know what? I actually kind of have to defend the convention here. I don't think that they did anything wrong, because what happened here is that the person dislocated their leg. They can't move they have to defer to the Vancouver Convention Center staff. in order to treat the person.
Oh,
So they have to follow their protocols. AnyRevo is not actually able to make the calls here, and that is they have to call the
really?
ambulance, follow the convention center's protocols for calling the ambulance, and if you know anything about the state of the medical system in BC right now, it is very bad. Ambulances take a long time to arrive, and it's just not it's not getting the appropriate funding and support that it needs at this time, and COVID has just made it into a terrible situation.
Got it. That's
So yeah,
yeah.
I mean I know it's bad everywhere, but it's especially bad in BC right now. So and the thing is that if a person dislocates their leg, the appropriate protocol is that you can't move them. You cannot move the person until the ambulance arrives. So this is a bit of a nightmare situation since you had this person in somewhat
On
on
stage.
stage, visible situation. They have to like put barriers around the person to isolate them,
Yeah.
and they have to handle the crowd. They have to handle the performers. Maybe the communication could have been better with the audience about what was happening, or
Yeah.
they could have
Yeah.
made the call and canceled it sooner. It's obviously going to be really scary and stressful to keep that hanging for a while, but yeah, like it's a tough situation to deal with. And from what I can see, a lot of the anger that was being directed at them wasn't actually about the person who was injured on stage. What it was actually a lot of the anger was about the fact that the Idol showcase was canceled and that the groups weren't able to perform after they had trained for so long.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that the convention really handled this badly. I think that they did what they had to do, and ultimately, if someone's injured, that's going to take priority. And I think it feels like a lot of
Yeah, of
people just
course.
wouldn't accept that, just because so many of them are looking
Uh-huh.
for an outlet to perform. This is a bad situation with bad optics and with the way that AnyRevo has handled things in the past. I don't blame people for not giving them the benefit of the doubt, but in this situation, I don't think that the con did anything wrong, and I think that a lot of the people who just have it out for AnyRevo for things that have happened in the past, this is just like raw meat for them, and that's what happens a lot of the time with AnyRevo. There'll be one thing that turns into this gigantic circus, whether it's justified or not. And because this one thing has turned into a giant circus, all of the problems with the convention that happen year after year
Get
kind
over
of get overlooked and ignored
they get overlooked,
as a
yeah.
result because everyone's just arguing about this one thing. And you have the issues like, not having anything to do after the exhibitors hall closes, and maybe the most serious problem at AnyRevo, which I haven't mentioned yet, which is the bootlegs. Their exhibitors
Oh,
hall, it has improved. They're not as bad for bootlegs as they've been in the past, but there's still, you go in there, you're still gonna see some tables that are selling wall scrolls and puzzles and plushies that anybody with even remotely discerning eye can tell are bootlegs. So, um, yeah. So they're and apparently it's just like one or two stores that are buying multiple tables who are doing this. So even though the situation has improved, they're not doing enough to crack down on it. And another thing that they do is that if you go in there, you'll notice that their exhibitors hall seems like mostly artist alley, and that is because they allow artists to buy exhibitors hall tables, which is
really?
something that most conventions don't allow. And because vendors
Right.
don't like it, and because they're doing those things, but especially because they allow the bootlegs in, they have lost valuable vendors.
Right.
CNL Media used to be at Anime Revolution every year for the first 5 or 6 years. They stopped coming, and if you ask them why, they will explicitly tell you it's because of the bootlegs. And I think it is kind of ridiculous that AnyRevo has just essentially chosen to allow the bootleg sellers then to keep an incredibly valuable retailer like CNL Media. Because without CNL Media,
That
they don't really
is
have anyone
really
selling
surprising.
lots of physical media and manga. Uh,
Right.
in fact, there's only like one comic store that was selling manga there. Most of the other stuff is just figures and artist alley
Really?
stuff working as vendors. So that's a huge problem with the con. That even though they've seemed to have taken small steps to address it, it's not the type of action that they need to take. So that's something that they really need to work on there. So Ani-Revo continues to be a highly flawed convention. I do like doing panels there. I like doing panels in Vancouver. They are the best place to do panels. A lot of how they handle panelists and the panelist experience is actually really good at this convention. I have to give them high marks for that. They are. I actually like doing panels at. They're better than Sakura-Con. I think they are the best con to do panels at in this area. But outside of that, it continues to be, again, at best, very mediocre. Lots of stubborn problems that tie to long-standing issues, and then a lot of it gets buried in all this local drama that I've gone on about before. And I think I've already now talked about Ani-Revo almost as much as I talked about Otakuthon in this Otakuthon podcast. But this is a con that people have opinions about, and I guess I'm no different.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting
yeah.
because most of the time, and I think I said that, the perspective I hear about Ani-Revo comes from my other friends who are more focused on Japanese guests.
Exactly.
So for them,
Yeah.
Ani-Revo is the holy grail of, conventions in
Really?
Canada.
Because I mean, Otakuthon
Well,
seemed to actually. You know what? Anime-thon in Edmonton, which is the longest running anime convention in Canada. They also have a stellar lineup of
oh
Japanese guests
yeah,
as well. And here's the other big problem with Ani-Revo. It constantly, and this has been a problem for years, it constantly falls on the same weekend as Anime-thon, which does not help any of the problems that I outlined in this. And Anime-thon is the older, more established con, so I think that the onus kind of falls on Ani-Revo to try and
really change.
try to find maybe a different time of year to hold the event at.
It's funny though you mentioned that because at some point in time, I forget when it was, but Ani-Revo would happen at the same time, at the same weekend as Otakuthon.
See, that's not as big a deal because they're on different sides of the
Different,
country.
yeah, different coast.
But
Yeah, right,
but Edmonton and Vancouver are relatively closer to each other, so you're gonna have art like
right.
if actually I was looking, I was surprised so many artists were vending at both cons at the same time. They had people representing
Well, you
them.
say that, but I have friends who basically double
Yeah,
dipped that weekend.
exactly. And it's like,
They went to both cons.
and I'm just like, I'm glad you were able to find a solution to this, but it seems like you're running yourself thin here. And
Yeah.
this also absolutely does not help with the vendor situation. Because
Oh yeah,
if a
for
vendor
sure.
is going to choose between these two cons, of course they're going to go to Anime-thon instead.
Animathon, yeah.
And these two cons, like they're similar. I haven't been to Anime-thon, but I understand it's I think it's probably a little bigger than Ani-Revo. It's like 15,000 people. So it's probably also hurting growth for Ani-Revo as well.
I want to try Animathon next year if I can.
I'd love to try it at some point. I'm curious to check it out for
Yeah,
sure. I've heard nothing but good things about that con.
yeah.
But I mean, like you said, Ani-Revo, I think again, you go for the guests basically. If there's a guest you really want to meet, you go there. You plan your
Right.
entire weekend around seeing that guest and getting their autograph, and then do some sightseeing
Absolutely.
in Vancouver. Go to the North Van shipyards. It's the best place in the city. That's what I have to say about Ani-Revo this year. I will say that out of all my panels, I did the Bionics panel at Ani-Revo. That's the only con this year where I got to do it live, and the turnout was I probably had the worst turnout of all of my other panels.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I don't know if it's just because
Huh.
I mean obviously interest in Bionics is it's not going to grow over time. It's going to shrink.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Could
The
be.
people who did come enjoyed it a lot, so I'm glad I got to do it. But yeah,
Yeah. Nice.
Chris, I think that's just about all I have to say about these conventions. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, I think again, well, as going back to Otakuthon this year it's been a treat. I hadn't been to a convention since COVID started, so I really love the experience. I had forgotten how much I enjoy going to conventions, and no, I'm glad I went back this year, and I'm gonna try to go back to more conventions like I used to.
I hope to get to a few more cons next year for sure. And Otakuthon, definitely one I want to come back to in the future as soon as I can. And just go to Montreal. Again,
Awesome.
Montreal is such a great
Yeah.
city. I ate many delicious things there and saw many great things. So,
Next time we'll go to Schwartz.
yeah, I didn't want to stand in that line, but I'm glad I still had some good smoked meat. But yeah, Chris, what
Yeah.
can you let people know what anything you're up to or where people can find you online?
I am not up to much nowadays. Really busy with work. But you can find me on X at Kurotsuki, and I forget what's the name of the other one.
Blue Sky.
Blue
Yeah.
Sky. There you go. Thank you.
All right, and
I keep forgetting about Blue Sky.
yeah, it's pretty active, but it's unfortunately Twitter still is more active for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for tuning in to Zun and Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge, on Blue Sky also at jbetteridge, or email zunandcanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultra Kleistron. That can be found on his album Packet Flood, and you can find that at ultracleistron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice, and I'll see you again.